Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Conundrum Conversations. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Viviana Méndez, the legal counsel for Latin America at Gensler, one of the world's leading architecture, design, and planning firms. She has a very extensive background in international arbitration, construction law, and climate policy. From her work at the Viking Case in New York and London to advising on international disputes and sustainability initiatives, Viviana has built a highly impressive career, and we are so excited to hear about her journey. Thank you so much, Viviana, for being here.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Perfect. So, starting off, Viviana, we asked this question to all of our guests on the show. What inspired you to have a career in law? Was there a particular defining moment or experience that shaped your interest?
Actually, no, I was ironically I was going to study something completely different. And I was supposed to our school year in Costa Rica goes from January to December. But the most school years elsewhere go from September onwards, and I was supposed to go into art school to do architecture in August, but I had to do something during the time that I was here, kind of waiting to go pursue that career, and I enrolled in law school quite circumstantially, and I ended up really liking it. But it wasn't by design that I ended up doing this.
Wow, so you found your calling accidentally. That sounds like the perfect fantasy. Now,
Yes, something like that.
most of my audience comprises of students either in law school or those who aspire to go to law school. And we know that you've had a terrific academic record spanning from your JD from the University of Costa Rica, your LNM at Harvard. Could you tell us if there were any particular experiences that profoundly impacted you and shaped your perspective of the legal field during law school?
Sorry, I think I lost you there towards the end, but if I understood you correctly, you were asking me if there were any defining experiences from law school, both in undergrad and in grad school, that shaped kind of what I'm doing now. Is that correct?
Yes, that's it.
Okay. Yes, to answer your question, yes, there were a few kind of, let's call it defining experiences that really shaped what I wanted to do. And I think that the most important one that really drove me to do into what I ended up doing for a very long time was I did a moot court competition during my second and my fourth year of law school. So I think here in most countries, and I believe it's the same case for Pakistan, law school is 5 years. And so I did a moot court called the Willem Seavis International Arbitration Commercial Moot, and it takes place in Vienna, also in Hong Kong. And at the time, I think my school was very new to participating in the competition. It was one of the earlier editions, and it was such a fantastic experience in terms of learning how to write, legal writing in a different language, but also just kind of going to a hearing and learning how to advocate. And it was such a powerful experience that really kind of shaped my career in law. And after I did the visa moot, I was very kind of sure that I wanted to give this thing called arbitration a chance. So I started pursuing more opportunities in international arbitration since, and I did an internship for a firm called Three Crowns. Um, I think I was their first intern in Washington, D.C. And at the time they were just starting, and I also really enjoyed that experience. I got to do investment treaty arbitration, and it was really, really interesting. And ever since I kind of started gearing my career towards kind of working in international dispute settlement. And so, but going back to your question, I think that doing the visa moot really was kind of the defining moment that drove me into the world of, let's call it, international arbitration.
Wow, that's great. So your time at law school, it seems very happening with the law mood, especially. So if you could give advice to students who are either entering law school right now or want to enter in the future, what would that be?
I think that the advice that I would give, and it's probably the advice that I would have wanted to have when I was starting law school, is to take advantage of the many opportunities that are available and ask people that are older what those opportunities may be. Because when I started studying law school, I was under the impression I just had to go to class and complete a 5 year kind of curriculum. And little did I know that there were so many different things that I could do with my degree. Um, There were summer programs abroad around the world that I could attend. There were moot court competitions in all different subjects of law, from arbitration to public international law with Jessup, to world trade law with Elsa, to international criminal law and the programs for The Hague. There were so many opportunities abroad, not to mention study abroad programs and exchange programs between universities. There were even research kind of programs for people who wanted to like write their dissertation elsewhere. And so I think that there's so much out there, and such, great opportunities in this kind of diverse global world that we live in, that I don't think a career in law today looks the same way that it used to 50 years ago, where everyone just kind of went to school from start to finish. But there's so much more we can do with our careers. And so I think my advice would be for everyone to kind of take advantage of those opportunities.
Amazing. That is great advice. Now, Viviana, moving forward, we're going to talk about your past experiences, like your time at White and Case, that exposed you to a wide range of international arbitration, public international law matters. How did that experience shape your approach to dispute resolution and legal strategy in your current role?
Thank you for the excellent question. Um, how did my time at White and Case shape my perspective towards dispute resolution and my strategy is around the topic? Is that correct? Just to make sure that
Yeah.
I'm replying. Okay. Um, so how did my time at White and Case shape my perspective on dispute resolution? Well, first of all, I loved working at White and Case. I think it was probably one of the most phenomenal experiences I ever had in my life and will probably have. I have such great admiration for the firm and for the people that work there. I mean, I was very intentional when I was studying at Harvard about wanting to work at White and Case. White and Case was my first choice for a law firm, and it was thankfully the place that I ended up working for many years. White and Case is and has been for the past over 20 years the best firm in international arbitration worldwide. So, in terms of how did it change my perspective, I think it showed me the meaning of what it means to be excellent as counsel. Uh, because everyone at White and Case, everyone in the team, regardless of how junior or how senior they are, is so committed to excellence and what that means and what that looks like in every stage of the proceeding, from meeting with the client to drafting even an email, to going to a hearing. There is perfection in everything that is done. And that is an incredibly difficult and high standard to constantly meet. But it is met thanks to the work that everyone puts in. Um, White and Case, I think yes, definitely one of the perspectives it showed me was to be excellent about everything that you do, how to really take the time to be very focused on what it is that you're doing, how to be focused, spotting like even tiniest errors in an email. You become very, very good at those kind of things. I think that that's one thing that it really taught me. Um, I think the other thing that White and Case taught me in terms of how to approach or have a different perspective towards dispute resolution, um, it it's White and Case arbitration is a group that really focuses on creativity and being creative towards the different cases and problems that you have. And I mean, again, this is public information, but the firm has led some of the most pioneering cases in terms of international arbitration. For example, Avalaclat versus Argentina back in 2012, before my time, is a case that really revolutionized international arbitration because it was one of the first investor state dispute cases that allowed for mass claims in international arbitration. And I think that that's just one of many examples of how White and Case thinks outside the box and takes a medium to solve disputes as international arbitration and turns it into something so appropriate for a different client, for a different case, or for a different necessity. So definitely, I think that the two things that White and Case really teaches you are perfection and just being really, really good at what you do. But second, how to be creative and think outside the box in a way that you're really listening to your clients and understanding what their needs are. In terms of the kind of the second part of your question, which concerns strategy, or so I recall. Please correct me if I'm wrong at any point.
Yes, you're correct.
Okay, good. In terms of strategy, I think that I mean, it varies a lot. I'm trying to think how to answer this question in terms of what White and Case taught me about strategy. So strategy is something that for every case, at least my recollection of how we worked at this at White & Case is, there's a lot of emphasis vis-a-vis strategy, not only at the beginning of the case, but also as how any case progresses. And that's also natural to think about it that way. Yes, there's always an initial strategy for each case, but depending on how cases sometimes grow, sometimes the strategy will change. And I think that's something excellent. One of the many excellent things that White & Case does is that they're adaptable and they're flexible to change. And the partners who are, in charge of running the cases and leading many of the strategy are also really good about paying attention to what their teammates have to say. Working at White & Case is it's being part of a team and understanding that everyone has a voice and a say. And understanding that sometimes your most junior people can have an excellent idea about how to run something and it works. So I think that in terms of strategy, White & Case teaches you to be not only adaptable, but to understand that strategies can and will change, but also that in order to have the best strategies, you have to work as a team. So perhaps that's the answer that I would like to give. Yeah.
Super, that was a great answer. Now, Viviana, moving on to your current roles, as the legal counsel for Latin America at the world's largest architecture and design firm, what does a typical day look like for you?
So it really varies. I transitioned in-house not long ago, but the work is very different and very some of it is very challenging as well. I am counsel for all of my region. So there is not one day that looks the same, but there are, I can say, pockets of what different groups of what my work may look like. And I think it goes the same as to many people that also work in house. So obviously there's a part of my job that consists of reviewing kind of contracts and negotiating contracts on behalf of the company for the region that I work in. There's another part of my job that consists in managing claims and overseeing them, including coordinating with outside counsel. Now, Gensler as a company, it's a U.S. company first and foremost, although it's now very much international. But as a result, it's a company not very focused on claims. It's a company more focused on resolving any issues amiably. So disputes work is not really as much as I used to do, of course. But there's also some compliance matters for the region, and there are also a lot of, I would say, thought leadership activities, which I find very interesting. So because when you work in-house, you're working with people who are not necessarily lawyers, some of the work consists of training your people and your colleagues about how to approach certain things regarding contracts or negotiations so that people are better equipped when they have to meet with clients. And I find that part really satisfying because it's akin to teaching, which is something that I like doing. So I find that like a really nice part of the job.
Super. And since you mentioned that your role it varies a lot, right? We know that one of your roles at Gensler is that you're the legal advisor on climate action and sustainability. So, what challenges do companies face in meeting sustainability commitments, and how does legal counsel play a role in that process?
Mm. Well, that's an excellent question. So obviously, look, I think that it's not a secret for anyone that the climate crisis is probably the biggest crisis facing humanity right now. Um, and many companies around the world, including Gensler and many countries as well, for that sake, have made commitments towards sustainability. In Gensler's case, Gensler is one of the most sustainable companies in the world. There's a big focus on designing in a manner which is sustainable. But there's also a question with regards to, each company, and it varies a lot, has different goals with regards to how we can be more sustainable. And obviously that's a conversation that varies a lot company by company. In the case of Gensler, as counsel, There are different ways to advise companies on how to achieve these sustainability goals. In the case of construction or architecture firms, for example, there are a lot of certifications that can be sought that certify that a certain building or not is sustainable or meets certain sustainability standards. So that is one thing that can be done. Other things that other companies do, not necessarily Gensler, but other companies do invest in carbon credits. And so there are other lawyers work in kind of that area as a manner to support sustainability efforts. Of course, there's also many other initiatives with regards to how companies can be more sustainable. And I think that that's a really fascinating subject altogether, because overall, I do think that all of us have a collective responsibilities. Obviously, my personal opinion, right? Not anyone I represent, but I do think as a society, we have a collective obligation to try to do more for the environment and the only world that we have to live in.
Great. Thank you so much for enlightening us on that. That was new information for me, and I was able to learn from that. Now, Viviana, one of our main aims at the podcast is understanding how different legal systems work across the world. Now, you're dual
Mhm.
qualified in so it's one of our main aims is to understand how different legal systems work around the world. And we know that you're dual qualified in New York and Costa Rica, and you have worked across Latin America, the US,
Mhm.
and the Europe. What are the biggest challenges of practicing law across multiple legal?
Sure. I think that that's, first of all, I think that that's an excellent question. There are obviously challenges, that come when you practice law in different jurisdictions. I think that the most, let's call it like the most obvious division between legal systems is evenly split between common law and civil law. Of course, there are other systems that use, for example, Sharia law in the Middle East, but even then, at least my experience in the Middle East is that a lot of English law is still used in the Middle East. So the divide is still in my head very much turns on civil versus common law. I think the divide used to be more pronounced before than it is now. Um, why? Because we live in a very globalized world, and there are a lot of uniform laws for a lot of different that apply to a lot of different matters, that be it trade law, intellectual property law, international arbitration, investment laws pertaining to international arbitration. Some of them are unified. Even there are, international principles by organizations like UNIDROIT or conventions that apply to the sales of goods, like the CISG. So I think that that is changing. Obviously, there are still nuances and there are still differences. I think that the challenges always consist, depending on what you work, they can be different. But for example, I can give you examples with regards to two different areas. One of them concerns international dispute settlement or international arbitration work particularly, and the other concerns, let's call it contract negotiation. In terms of international arbitration, I think that one of the main challenges that you have is when you have when you have to appoint arbitrators to your case, you want to be mindful about the backgrounds that they have based on the type of dispute that you have. For example, um, common law trained lawyers are most likely to interpret contracts, for example, in a certain way. They're most likely to just read what the contract says without taking in any extraneous evidence. Civil law works a little bit differently, and there is more flexibility or ability to interpret contracts in different manners depending on the code and the jurisdiction that you're looking at. So that is a challenge that you have in international arbitration. You want to be mindful of who you're appointing to your cases, to understand their background, and to make educated guesses as to how they may decide on a given dispute. Um, as for contracts per se, I think one of the challenges that you have with regards to the civil law common law divide is that there are certain concepts that proper to common law that are extraneous or like not existent in civil law and vice versa, or even if they do exist, they're less common. So I'll give you an example in the realm of construction and design. In the realm of construction and design, in common law jurisdictions, the concept of standard of care is a very common and accepted concept worldwide. And it is a concept that is widely used to define the manner in which services are provided to meet this type of objective standard. but the concept of a standard of care is really very alien or known in civil law, particularly Latin America. And so you find yourself sometimes in contract negotiations having to explain a concept that's very basic anywhere else in the world or in a lot of places in the world. And you find a lot of rejection towards these concepts because people are not familiar with them. So I think the challenges sometimes that you have is when you identify something that really works in a jurisdiction. So, for example, you identify that these standards of care really work in common law jurisdictions, but they don't necessarily work in civil law, and you want to implement them, bridging that gap and explaining to people and changing the market and the culture for people to value and understand what something different is, always comes with challenges and resistance. But hopefully, I'm hopeful that markets change as they progressively become more globalized.
Well, thank you so much, Viviana, for that comprehensive overview. Now, lastly, is there any general advice that you would like to give to motivated high school students and aspiring legal professionals who want to break into the field of law?
Yes, well, thank you for that. If there is any aspiring advice for high school students and professionals that want to break into the field of law, I think my advice is to have fun. Law can be it's such a versatile degree. When people sometimes think of law, they perhaps have an association of what they can do with their law degree, and perhaps that looks like going into a law firm or working at a court. But in reality, there is so much. Sorry, I'm looking at sideways because my dog is here somewhere, and I can't see him. But apologies for that. But my advice would be to consider that a law degree is probably one of the most versatile degrees you can have. There are so many different things you can do with a law degree. A lot of my Harvard classmates, after they got their LLM, they went into business school, or they went to do pursue consultant business careers. I have another classmate who became a policeman and heads like the law enforcement uh, in an Asian country. Uh, there are a lot of lawyers that also study journalism hand in hand, and some of the best lawyers are also journalists. Of course, there's always traditional quote unquote careers where people want to go to a law firm or go to a court and litigate. But ultimately, I think one of the most beautiful things about having a law degree is the flexibility that it allows to really do anything you can envisage with your career. So I guess my advice would be for anyone who's considered to study law to appreciate how much of a versatility a degree like law will give you. And so if you're not entirely clear as to whether you should pursue it or not, just please have the assurance to understand that even if you're not entirely certain you want to just pursue law at a big law firm or a law firm, there's so much more that you can do with your law degree, and it can be so much fun. So that would be the advice that I have.
Well, thank you so much for that. I personally did not know that, and I'm sure high school students do not know the versatility that a law degree holds. So, thank you so much for that overview. And Viviana, thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your amazing insights and all of the valuable lessons you've given us. I'm sure my audience learned a lot. I know I learned a lot. So, thank you once again for being here with us. And to our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to tune in more for more insightful conversations. Until next time.